Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in for this week's webinar on how to ace an interview. My name is Sophie Trinietsky, and I'm the Campus Program Fellow here at the Network of Enlightened Women. I'm so excited today to be joined by Patricia Rausch. Thank you so much for joining us, Patty.
Thank you, Sophie. I'm really excited to be here.
Patty is the Director of Career Programs at LI. In addition to leading the Career Division, she is in charge of Political and Fundraising Training Division and serves as the Non-Finance Human Resources Representative for the Leadership Institute, working with the executive team to update and draft new policies based on employee feedback. Under her leadership, but mainly through the hard work and dedication of her team, the Careers Division hosts 12 types of training and performs hundreds of career consultations per year. The division staff also manages the intern program as well as all aspects of Conservative Jobs, which is Leadership Institute's free job placement website, and currently serves more than 2,000 job seekers, which is awesome. So we have a couple questions for Patty today to help us clean up our interview skills. And the first one, Patty, is how do you stand out in an interview?
Well, that is a common question. And it's even more common now that we are all at home and we can't go to in-person interviews. So I like to tell people you can stand out by having a very professional background and not to do something, oops, I just stopped my video, did not mean to do that. And not to have something unprofessional like, let's say this, or this, or this. But you should definitely try and keep it something neutral. If you are in, right now, I am in a spare bedroom of our house. And you wouldn't know that because it looks like this beautiful Peloton apartment, right? That's where my bicycle should go in the overlooking the windows. And it immediately draws the attention to you and there's no real distractions behind you. So you're standing out immediately by saying, I am professional and I'm taking this seriously. And I'm taking it seriously that I have good lighting, I have natural lighting, that I want to present myself the best I possibly can. So that's what you can do with presentation, just in general of your surroundings. You want to make sure you're in a quiet place with good lighting and professional background. Now, when it comes to standing out in an interview, the number one way for people when they come interview with me is when they show that they have done their research. And by doing their research, I mean that they have studied the job description. They know the ins and outs of everything. What skills are required? Do they draw a connection between their experiences and the skills that I have listed in the job description? Can they tie themselves to the job? Can they tie themselves in a creative way? You know, if they have done sales jobs in the past and they want to move over into the political realm, how do they connect that where it's I can present, I can speak publicly, I can sell an idea, I know how to interact with people, I know interpersonal communication, I can write well, whatever it may be. Is if you can draw that connection between your past experiences to this one, I can tell that you've really prepared, that you've done some research about it. Also, what do you know, if you're going to interview with me, what do you know about the Leadership Institute? If you're going to interview with New, what do you know about New? What can people tell you when New was founded? Can people talk to you about Karen Agnes and the hard work that she did at University of Virginia? You know, do they know the history? If they do, that impresses me because it tells me that they took a little bit of extra time just to do some extra research that is thoughtful. What are some current projects that the organization or the company that you're interviewing with, what are they doing? What if, let's say, what's the vision statement? What's a mission statement? Can they actually speak to that? And also, you know the name of the person you're going to be interviewing with. Have you done any research on them? Do you know about their background? Do you know where they've worked? Are there things that you can work into that conversation that helps you make a connection with them, right? So it's, Sophie, you and I, right before this, is that we had a little conversation about where you're from, and you're from South Jersey. And we had a little conversation about pork roll versus Taylor ham. And for those who are tuning in, who have no idea what we're talking about, Sophie, let them know about what that is.
So in New Jersey, we have this food called pork roll, and it's basically like Canadian bacon, and it's only a Jersey thing, but there's a huge divide in the state between calling it Taylor ham or pork roll.
Right. So if I were going to interview with you, I would look at your background, all this, and I would see that you were from New Jersey. And one of the things that could immediately ingratiate myself to you is knowing that hot debate in the state of New Jersey of pork roll versus Taylor ham. And it immediately disarms you and it puts you at ease as the interviewer. And it makes me feel like, okay, I now can talk to this person. They responded well. I'll be able to be more at ease with the questions and answers that I give to anything that you're going to ask me. So it's looking for those personal connections, or at least some personal details where you can ask the interviewer something of their opinion. So it's not this super formal back and forth, and instead it's a very casual conversation. And that's really what you're looking to do. That's what the research is there for. It's so you're really prepared, but it's so you can carry on a conversation. You can't really carry on a conversation if all it is just a series of questions back and forth.
That's so helpful. Thank you so much for that.
Mm-hmm.
I know people normally suggest that you bring like resumes into your interviews, but now that we're doing all these interviews via Zoom, what type of suggestions do you have that kind of take place of that preparedness?
Well, the great thing about Zoom is that there is a feature called share screen. And you can talk to the person who you will be interviewing with ahead of time and ask them, hi, I would normally bring some of these things along with me in person, but since we're not going to be face to face, I was wondering if you would be okay if I had some documents to put up on a share screen feature that I can go over with you in person. Some of these things are my resume. Some things might be my writing samples or some design work that I've done, just so you have that right there and you can talk about it and explain it in real time. You should also take the time to email a PDF document of your resume to everyone who you will be interviewing with that day. You want to make sure that it's a PDF version. Sophie, why do you think that we send PDFs?
Because PDFs are universal, so you're not going to deal with formatting issues from Mac to PC.
Exactly. Because the formatting issues, what does it make the person look like when you open up the wrong kind of document?
You look very unorganized.
Unorganized, like you don't care, your spacing's wrong, your margins are off. It looks terrible. PDFs are the way to go. You should only send PDFs if you're sending your resume or cover letter to anyone. It also means that the person can't accidentally make a typo on your resume when they're looking at the document in a Word form. And that's good because you don't want to be the person who has the typo in the document. You want to have your friends looking over your resume, your cover letter, making sure that there are no mistakes, and then save it into a PDF form and send it over. Speaking of other things that you should have if you're going to be interviewing remotely, you can share your resume on screen, you can share your supplemental documents, your writing samples, and your creative things. But you should also have, need to find this, a notebook of some sort. You should have a notebook because you should be taking notes. And unfortunately, people can hear you if you're typing, right? But instead it's I'm writing down while I'm doing this. And you can let someone know, say, I'm taking notes right now because I think I might want to come back to this, or I'm really interested in learning about this particular part of your organization or your company. And when you take notes during an interview, at the end of an interview, when you say goodbye and you say thank you, you might think, oh, I wish I had said this instead. Or you look back at your notes and say, oh, there's something else I wanted to add to that. By taking notes, you have something to reference back to, and you can send us an email, a follow-up email of thanks and a clarification of sorts that our connection may have been bad, right? Is that you may have had a fuzzy connection. So you say, I'm concerned that my answer didn't come across because of the bad connection. I wanted to follow up by telling you this. and putting your answer in writing to your interview questions. Anything that can help you get your point across or the information that you want to be presented to that person, take your time to do that. And you can do that by referencing your notes and making sure that you are addressing the most important things that were talked about that day. You should also have a lovely cup of water. I do have a cup of water in my hand. Ready? Oh, there it is. Wait, there it is. These Zoom backgrounds. So this is another good thing about a Zoom background, is that people can't see all of the random stuff that I have in front of me. I also have a phone where I can set the timer so I can see how long the interview is going. Because that's another thing. You don't want to keep rambling on and on and on. You want to be conscious of the time. But when you have a drink of water, you can, I'm just going to take a pause right there, have myself a Marco Rubio moment, and then we can go back on. But these are all things that you would normally have with you at an in-person interview, but now you have them right in where your little space is, where your workspace is. And I'm trying to look around at the other stuff that I have here. I also have some hard candies in case I need to do that, because if I'm going to be talking a lot. And that's all. There's really no other distractions. I don't have a TV going in this room. I have the door closed. I can't hear anything that's happening in other rooms of my home. If you have roommates and you're all working from home, you should try and find some place that is a private area for you to go. And you can even wear your headphones so you don't get distracted by other things. Whatever you can do to create a space where it's just you is the best thing that you can do. You might even have to ask your roommate or whoever you live with, hey, would you mind go for taking your exercise walk right now? You know, I just need some time, or because you're not going to want to do your interview in a bathroom, right? Which might be the only private area in the apartment. But you really want to take the time and figure those things out so you aren't caught off guard and you are comfortable. Some people also find it easier to talk into a camera if they're standing up and being able to walk around a little bit. You know, when you get on a phone call and you end up walking around your entire apartment, it's like walking on the couch. There are memes of that where it's nobody can stand still. It's like a guy ends up on the roof on the phone just because he's walking everywhere. Well, sometimes that's how it is when you are just talking in front of a camera, because it's very unnatural. You can't, right now it looks like I'm looking at you, right? It's because I'm looking directly into the camera. But just below the camera, I have you centered on my screen. So I can have that eye contact. But other people, it's difficult to do. So if they stand up, they can actually see more. And they're more expressive. Because when you talk with your hands, you can be more expressive that way. And it's a more natural conversation. Then instead, if you're just sitting here and you're really nervous and you're shaking, you know, because interviews make people nervous no matter what. But if you're standing up, you can move your legs around a little bit and you can actually, but just make sure that you practice this beforehand, because you don't want to be the person who is all around screen and you're never actually on screen, because that can be really distracting for the interviewer. But if you're standing up and you actually can move your legs side to side and just shift your weight a little bit, it will make you more aware and it'll keep you more awake and alert during an interview. So you do seem like you are into it and you're excited and you want to talk about these things, because it's something to get used to. And it's not easy, and people who pretend like it's really easy are really lucky, but most of us aren't that lucky, and we do need to practice very often.
I never really thought about taking notes through an interview. What's your opinion on doing that with an in-person interview?
You should 100% bring a notebook with you to every interview that you go on. I know someone who has hired many, many people over the years, and she told me that if someone doesn't bring a notebook to an interview, she will not consider them for the next round. Just right off the bat, it does not matter what they say in the interview. She has already removed them from contention because they're not prepared. They're not ready to take into account what the interviewer is saying about anything. So they're not going to be able to go back and reference things. It's just be prepared. You can absolutely take notes during the whole thing, because you need to get it in your mind that you're also interviewing the company and organization. You want to make sure that it's a good fit for you. There are obviously times where you just need a job, and that's okay, but you should still be taking notes about it because you want to do the best job you can. You need to know what their expectations are. And oftentimes they set the expectations right in the interview. Your interview is part of your onboarding process. So you need to take notes, meticulous notes from the very beginning, so you can do the very best job that you can.
Okay, that's very helpful to know. And then what is the biggest mistake that you see in interviews?
Mistakes. So I want to remove the idea that being nervous is a mistake, because some people are just naturally very nervous people, and you can see them. And I've had people interviewing where I thought that they were about to cry because they were so nervous about everything. And I would kind of stop it and move into more of a, like, tell me about yourself. Where did you grow up? Do you have any pets? Do you have any, just to get them talking about something that they're really comfortable talking about or they're super familiar with, because nobody knows you better than you know yourself. So if you can talk about that, so that's okay. That's not a mistake. You can work on that to get less and less nervous, and that's a good thing. But the mistakes are not preparing. I can see a nervous person giving me really thoughtful answers about stuff, or they have prepared them and they tell me, I'm not a very good interviewer, I get nervous. So I've actually written down some answers to very common questions that help me so I can read it. And I'll say, absolutely, that's fine, I understand. It's the people who come in and they haven't done any research. They haven't thought about the job, is that they're just coming in because they think that they are either going to get the job automatically for some strange reason and they just haven't put in the work, or they don't really care about the job and they're just looking for a paycheck. That is a huge mistake. You need to let the people know that it's you really want this. Another mistake is being very casual in a way that makes you overly familiar with the person with whom you're interviewing. So I told you in the beginning that you should research the person who is going to be conducting your interview. That doesn't mean that you should bring up things in an awkward way, such as, so how did you like, I went to SUNY Brockport in New York State. One time someone goes, so how'd you like Brockport? I said, I was in my office, I said, how'd you know I went to Brockport? Did we go to school together? And he goes, no, I was stalking your LinkedIn before coming in here today. Those are the types of words that you don't want to use when you go in for an interview. It's stalking is never a word you should use in any scenario. When you go in, I was expecting him to ask how some of my aunts were and naming them by name because he looked through my Facebook photos or something, right? It's thank goodness for privacy settings. But those are things that you should avoid doing. You shouldn't talk to someone like you've been friends with them forever. But on the other side of it is that, so Sophie, you were a chapter leader at Catholic University for NEW. So you were very familiar with the national staff. When you interviewed, you obviously knew them and you were friendly with them and likely friends with them, but you probably were quite professional in your interview because you respected them and you respect the job. So even when you do know someone, you need to take that seriously, that this is a formal setting, and let them set the tone. They might say, Sophie, we know you, don't worry about it, is that this is an informal interview, but you should not assume that it's informal. You should really let the interviewer set the tone for however the interview is going to go.
I really like that you brought up the fact that being nervous isn't a mistake, because hearing from all of my friends that recently graduated and talking about them going into interviews, I feel like the biggest thing whenever I ask them, like, oh, how'd your interview go? They're like, oh, it didn't go well. Like, I think I didn't present myself well because I was nervous. And I think that's something that so many of us forget is such a natural reaction. And obviously, the interviewer is going to understand that to some point. So,
Right. And that's why we are bringing you in for an interview because something on your resume or your cover letter or a recommendation from someone else stood out enough that we are taking the time to talk to you. We want you to do well. It's not, we don't want everyone to suck and one person to be really good, right? So for you to be open and say, I get a little nervous during interviews, especially if it's interviews for your first job and you're just starting out in your career, the stakes are high, especially right now, is that there are so many people who are nervous, new grads, who probably wonder, how am I even going to get a paying job right now when people have been working forever are out of work? That is scary. It makes people more nervous during an interview because they don't want to mess it up. It's, I need this job so badly. But you have to force yourself to try and calm down a little bit. And if you do mess up during the interview because of nerves, that's why we have the notebook and we took notes. And we can reference back to what was discussed, and you can follow up in the email saying, as you can see, I was a bit nervous. I want to reiterate my answer to the question. And so you can send that in an email form. And if any of you have any questions on how to do that and how to present that in email, feel free to reach out to me however you would like to. You can get my contact information through the new staff. It's no problem, but I will help you with your job search and how to navigate that, especially if you are a nervous interviewer. Because I really want you to succeed. I want you to get a job. There's such dignity in work, and I want you to be receiving a paycheck and being able to make a difference however you want to in the future.
I know that definitely eased a lot of our minds, so thank you for that. And then one last question before we get into the Q&A from our viewers. What are some unique interview questions that you suggest that people always have prepared?
All right. The main one, and this is one thing that I will always ask people, I never ask people what their weakness is, because you get stupid answers like, oh, I'm really bad at baking chocolate chip cookies, right? That's not a weakness. Or people get into really personal stories, and I don't need that either. But instead, a good one to be prepared for is, can you tell me a time that you failed, you really messed up, you did something that just was bad? And how did you fix it or overcome it or learn from it? How did you make sure that you're never going to do that again? It shows me humility when someone can actually answer the first part of it. And then the second part shows me that people don't dwell on the problem, they focus on a solution. And problem solvers are what we are looking for. We don't want people to bring all the bad stuff up and just complain about, this is not going well in my job and I just don't even want to handle it. Instead, it's this is not going well in my job, or this was a screw up, but I have a solution for it. And if you bring solutions to your supervisors or the higher ups in your organization or company, you're going to be so respected. They might say, no, that solution is wrong, but at least you tried to bring it up. And that's really what we're looking for. We're looking for people who are innovative and who are focusing on that solution instead of the problem. There are some other unique interview questions. If you ever have time, go through the list of questions that they ask during Google interviews, because there are random people who will ask some of those questions just to throw you off your game a little bit. They'll give you a problem like you're locked in a room and you fall in a pit and all you have is a ladder that's halfway. How do you get out of the pit, right? They'll ask these mind game questions, and it's to see how your mind thinks. Or they'll ask you, if you were an animal, what would you be? And it's just to see what qualities you think that you have. So kind of read lots of different articles about interviewing. And I would also look on Glassdoor and for the organization or the company you're interviewing with, and see what the people who work there have to say about it. Because they often give information about what the interviews are like. It'll help you prepare a little bit more for the interview.
Okay, cool. So we have some questions that we've gotten from our viewers. And the first question is kind of the opposite of what we just went over, but what sort of questions should I have prepared in advance to ask the interviewer?
What to ask them is some of the questions that I like are, what can you tell me about your organization or company that I can't find out on the website? Another question is, what are the types of, what are the backgrounds of the people who worked here and how did they get to come to work here? What is the company culture like? What can I expect on a day-to-day basis? Do coworkers like to spend time with each other? Are remote possibilities? So that's another thing you want to ask about now. Now that we've all, if I start working remote now, will I be expected to go work in an office setting? Do you have flexibility in the location of the position? These are just all different types of questions. And actually, if you go to conservativejobs.com and look on the resources tab, we have a job seekers guide, and it has a list of questions that you should be expected to ask or be asked of you, and questions you can ask the interviewer as well. So we have a whole resource on that.
Cool. This question that came in, I think, is very important. This is something that I always wonder because I think it's a fine line between saying too much and not enough. But what kind of information is a hiring manager looking for when they say, tell me a little bit about yourself? How do you answer that without rambling on about your life story?
That is always the most difficult thing to answer. Because nobody likes talking about themselves in that kind of context. And say, well, I was born in Central New York, and then I grew up and I played these sports. And because there's also, it's like, I'm much older than you, Sophie. So my answer could be much longer than what yours is. Or you could have done way more stuff in your life than I have, and yours could be really long. And you just don't know what to focus on because you don't have that much professional experience, but you are just fresh out of college and you could have a lot of exciting things to talk about. Bottom line, what we are looking for is, I want you to give me a short elevator pitch of what makes you tick and what your goals are, right? So if someone asked me, Patty, tell me a little bit about yourself, I'd say, well, I have lived in the DC area for about 15 years, and I've worked in conservative politics for a majority of those years, either on campaigns or or in nonprofits. My passion is to help other people, and I found that is the most rewarding positions I've had are doing those things, and that's really why I'm here today, because I think that this position for which I'm interviewing for really uses my unique skill set and marries it with whatever your organization wants to accomplish, right? So you start saying a little bit about your background and what you've done, but then move it towards the job that you're interviewing for and how your background ties into this new job, right? That's really that's the reason why we ask it. Tell me about yourself and then how it goes into that. But then other people, there are other places they'll follow up and say, pardon me, no, like really tell me about yourself. What are your interests? Blah, 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 blah. And you never actually have to answer that. You could say, because someone will go, what do you do for fun? And everyone always goes, oh no, how do I answer this? Can I tell them I go to bars, right? Or do I need to say I love reading? What do I do? I love movies. So also be prepared to talk about just you in general. Oftentimes they're doing that just to see if you're going to be a good culture fit. Is that if you are someone who loves reading, they'll be like, oh, we have a book club. You'd love that if you join our staff. So the first iteration of it is talk about your background and what got you to wanting to interview for this job, but also be prepared to talk about yourself and your interests and what makes you tick in general. Because we really want to know that too, is that it's exciting to find out what makes you the whole you and not just the professional you.
That's great advice. I know this is I feel like this is a question that a lot of people talk about now, and people are very opinionated one way or the other. But do you recommend sending a handwritten note as a thank you or following with just the email?
I believe in handwritten thank you notes. I think that they are a lost art, but you should send an email at the very least. Right now, an email is all you're going to have. It would be very awkward if I ended up getting a handwritten thank you note delivered to my home. It because my home address is not listed anywhere. So, like I said before about the stalking and doing your research, there are some things that are off limits. So right now, be prepared to at least send an email. And when we move from the now times to the after times, and we can start sending mail to each other, that there's no reason to not send a handwritten thank you note. And you really should have the note card with you at the interview. And immediately after it's done, fill it out and drop it in the mail. Drop it in a mailbox that is close to whatever office you just interviewed in because it'll get there quicker.
Okay, that's a very good point. And then Julia asked, do you have any advice for answering questions that you don't know the answer to?
The advice is you tell them, I'm unsure about that, but if I did some research, I'm sure I could come up with an answer for you. You have to be honest. You don't BS your way through anything because we'll figure it out.
That's good to know.
And it shows humility to admit that you don't know something.
Good point. Patty, thank you so much for this. This was super informative. And
thank you, Sophie.
I definitely have a lot of notes that I want to take about this and prepare for my next interview. So thank you.
Thank you, and keep up all the great work that NEW is doing. You are very important to the conservative movement and to women in general.
Well, thank you so much. So are you. Have a good one.
You too.